Welcome to a new episode of the Boardroom Podcast. I'm Ward 4 Alderman Chad Wicker. I have a special guest today, a long-time Hernando resident, and some people are probably going to be shocked when I say you're on the podcast with me, but I have John Williams here. John, how you doing, man?
Good, and I appreciate you reaching out to me and inviting me on your podcast. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I think we had some things going on in Hernando with the issue with the water, and I saw you had wrote an op-ed, I guess you would call it, and I reached out to you, said let's come have a conversation. I think a lot of times, especially in just the divisiveness of politics now, people talk around each other and things like that. I just want to maybe have a conversation about what's going on, put some of the facts out there, get some your opinion. You do have an accounting background, especially with your father and his business and things. So I think this is a great opportunity to have a conversation. So welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you. And to tell you, talking about the divisiveness of politics, it's one of the things that I like so much about what Charlie Kirk was doing is I think that when we sit across the table and talk to each other, like you had mentioned, you and I have done a lot of talking at each other. And I think when we, talk and flesh things out, we find out we have a lot more in common than we think we do. I know Johnny Adams and I have found that to be true with our little breakfast we do.
Yeah.
It's you sit across the table from someone or break bread with them, and you realize they have the same intentions, just maybe different ideas on how to go about doing things.
And I think we've said, we probably agree on 95% of the things. It's
right.
Maybe the 5% where we maybe diverge a little bit, but it's still, I don't think, a big diversion. So you want to get into it? John, so obviously there's been, at our last, but we typically on this podcast is me and Ben Piper go into basically the board meetings. And Ben has been busy working. He's got a new job. It's no secret. So he's been a lot busier. So I did a couple shows by myself, and then this opportunity came up. So we're basically going to talk about the meeting from February 17th, but the big issue at that meeting was the discussion about our water rates, our sewer rates, our garbage rates, the utility fund deficit that was raised. So that's kind of what our discussion and conversation is going to be about. What we did at the meeting, John, and I know you probably watched it, is at the conclusion of the meeting, we took a vote 3-3 with the mayor casting the deciding vote to approve a rate increase of, there's a $5 flat fee for wastewater on your bill, increase that from $5 to $10, and then increase the DECRUA portion of your bill that's right now $3.84 per 1,000 gallons to $5 per 1,000 gallons. And that will get our budget out of the deficit that we had, the projected deficit. And also we made about $370,000 in some cuts to the budget. And I think we'll get into that in a minute. But that's basically what we did, John. And so what, you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so a lot of thoughts. Not sure which order to go in.
Go ahead.
The problem, first of all, the utility fund is an enterprise fund, and so by state law, it's supposed to operate and break even off of user fees. And there's only, when it comes to balancing the budget, you either got to make more or spend less. It's not rocket science. What the problem, one of the biggest problems I had from the outside looking in was sort of the timing of it. This thing didn't happen overnight. This has been, I've gone back and looked at audits for several years, and you could see this coming. Anyone who knew anything about numbers could look at the budgets and follow the trends, and it was on the way. And so the problem that I had in terms of you guys as an alderman is this: you guys were caught off guard. This was a long time coming, but yet it was presented sort of as a panic situation. And the bottom line is the city of Hernando have been operating on a shoestring budget, and the mayor, I believe, was aware of these issues not long after the budget was passed in September, and he didn't make you guys aware of it for a while. And so I think there's a transparency issue, maybe some financial requirement, regular financial requirements, because you guys as an alderman, y'all can only make decisions based off the information you have. And it sounds like you guys didn't have all of the information you needed in a timely manner. So you were faced with a situation where we got to do something. You had to act quick, and you did a mixture of cuts as well as raising the rates. And, of course, as a taxpayer, nobody wants to pay more money. But by state law, we had to balance that fund.
Yes.
And so it's balanced now. to me, the bigger issue is at this point, I'm a solutions-oriented person. I want to help any way I can to contribute to solving the problem, but I think that starts by trying to figure out how the problem got here and what the problems are to begin with. So that's what I'd like to talk about is
Sure.
what we can do. And you tell me, as an alderman, you've got a different perspective. I see it I'm watching YouTube videos and I see one thing, and you're in there seeing another, and you tell me. I mean,
that's one thing that when we were initially setting this up, I think you mentioned that we're privy to a little more information than maybe the general public, and so
right.
We can go all the way back. I've been in office. I took office in July of 2021, and at that time, the utility fund was fairly healthy. It was fairly healthy. Had a pretty good surplus in it, and we would actually, I think the first or second year we were in office, we borrowed money from the utility fund to cover the general fund, which we typically sometimes, a lot of cities do that, but we did that at the time because, as you know, John, we don't get our property taxes in until about this time of year every year. So from that October to January, February is kind of some lean times for the city in the general fund. And so over the time, I think that's what you're talking about, how we got here. I think we obviously we've been spending money. We've done a lot of water projects around town. We've done a lot of them ARPA projects, but some of them not. One of the projects we did is we ran some water to Lost Pizza, what is now Lost Pizza building there. That was an expense that we paid, got water to that building so they could put a sprinkler system in there so they could have a restaurant there.
Right.
When we have it passed on some of the expenses to the consumer. We have not changed our rates since 2017, and there was a lot of discussion at the meeting about how there's an ordinance that was pulled out of thin air that we had never heard about.
The only problem with that ordinance does make sense. The only problem is if you raise everybody's rates 3% every year, they're going to get sick of that crap.
Yeah.
I personally would rather have it one time every now and then ease up on me for a few years.
So and I guess we can explain that. So there was an ordinance passed, I think, in October or November, shortly after they bought the Northwest Mississippi Utility Association, the water system there, from Bill Robinson, that they would increase the water rates 3% a year, and that went on the shelf somewhere. And I guess nobody wanted to be the bad guy, or nobody remembered they did it. We've had, obviously we had a different mayor now since then. We have different public works people, and that never was done. And so that was located. And that was one thing we talked a lot about at the meeting. Can the mayor go back and retroactively raise the rates, which would be 9 years worth or 27%? And he was not comfortable doing that. And I think people would have been pretty upset if their water rates went up 30% or whatever. The attorney did, our attorney, Steve Pittman, did say that he probably felt like he could legally do that if he wanted to.
Right.
But he decided not to do that. And so we had to find another alternative to do that. And just my personal opinion, John, is I see the trash and the DECRUA as pass-through expenses. Those are expenses that we get, and then we pass that through to the consumer. Your garbage costs X amount of dollars. We should be charging the consumer X amount of dollars. That's what. Same thing with DECRUA. It costs us this. We should be paying this.
Yeah.
So I'm more comfortable making those whole instead of subsidizing those with tax dollars or with rate fees. But the water's a little different.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit a backstory on the water that my dad was telling me just a couple hours ago. So when he started his accounting firm, he and Bill Robertson went in partners on the building right there on Byhalia.
Yeah.
They owned that together. My dad had his office on one side and North Mississippi Utilities,
which is now, I think, the physical therapy place.
Yeah. And in my dad's billing system for Williams, Pitts and Beard, Bill Robertson was client number 0001.
Okay, he's the first one.
The very first one, yeah. So we've known that family and been involved and so with Bill for years and in fact my dad spoke at his eulogy at his funeral. But with Bill being private, he had these private water associations. He was subject to the Public Service Commission.
Yes, yeah.
And the cities were not. And so my dad was telling me that as the county began to grow and South Haven would buy one of, an area from him or Olive Branch, it always made Bill mad because the cities they weren't subject to the Public Service Commission.
They could raise the rates or whatever.
But he said the cities always undercut him. They never charged enough. And so it made him mad because people would always complain to him about he's charging too much. And he was like, this is a for-profit business I'm running. And so according to my dad, Hernando and none of the municipalities have ever charged enough for their water to cover the actual cost for what that's worth.
Well, I think some of that's because the people in the city have to get elected.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
And so, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think we've kind of been subsidizing that cost as well. And so, but anyway, getting back to the point, that's some of the things that has happened is we've kind of been sitting on. We haven't raised our rates to our consumers and this, the citizens in this area, and we also have increased our, there's been some subdivisions built out right outside the city limits. And I'm not terrible with subdivisions names, but I think Dale Wilson built one right there across from Jay Bird. There's Mr. Utley built one right over there. There's some other ones coming along, and so those are putting more people on the system, and they're actually they're not paying their share, so that that deficit is going down. And I think there was some, and the mayor has admitted to this, that he, probably could have communicated this issue better to us. Sure. And I don't want to, I think we talked about, we don't want to, pop Chip over the head or anything.
We just want to fix the problem.
And so, but I think in retrospect, he probably wished he would have communicated this a little better, and I hope we'll learn from it and move forward. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we got there. I mean, do you have some other numbers or something?
Yeah, let me show you this. So okay. I did a little research. I saw an article, I think it was with the DeSoto County News, where you had talked about the average household or something, 4,000 gallons a month. So I was just curious for my own sake and did a little spreadsheet here. Maybe you can, I don't know, we can make a slide out of it when you do your, but looking at what the new Hernando water bill would be and based off 4,000 gallons per month, and compared that with other cities. And so the reason I wanted to look at this is, as you can see under the new rate, Hernando's, on an annual basis, we're going to have one of the highest water, sewer, and garbage, rates or bills, total bills to the customer around. So my point is when we talk about trying to balance this budget, and I say this going forward because I don't believe, looking at the numbers, that we've solved the problem. I don't think we've completely we fixed it for this calendar year, but if we don't make some changes, I think we're going to continue to have this budgetary problem within the utility fund. And I don't think at this point we can raise the rates any higher. Yeah, we could, but I don't think it would be prudent to do that. And so, in theory, when it comes to the services that the city provides, especially on something like this, the revenue should keep up with, should increase with the population growth. And in this case, in Hernando's case, the expenses have far outpaced, the growth in the expenses have far outpaced the growth in the revenue. And so I think if we really want to solve this issue, we need to start looking at the expenses. Now, without having general ledger detail, I can look at budget items, budgets versus actuals from an accountant's perspective. And I can, you can go back and look historically, say over the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And you can say, well, this line item went up 180% in the last 5 years. Why is that? And that can help you identify red flags and places to look. But the bottom line is I believe we need to, as a city of Hernando, if you're just looking for ideas, we need to do a cost analysis and really look at every single item, not the budget, but the actual expenses for several years in a row, and then, and ask, why are we doing this? Do we have to have this? Can we cut back on this? Because the expenses have grown at a much higher rate year over year for several years in a row than the revenue has. And just like in your personal budgets, if you keep spending more money than you're bringing in, eventually it's going to catch up with you.
That's right.
At this point, I don't know how long it's been since we've done, you might say, a government efficiency type, Yeah,
well, I think the Doge is the big thing around. I think part of it, too, is inflation. Things just cost more.
It does, but it's far exceeded the revenue. Well, all I'm saying, I don't think you're going to find, and by the way, I want to address this. There's a lot of people that I've seen online and called me and who's stealing money. I don't think anybody has stolen any money. I think what this boils down to is it just crept up on us. Like you said, inflation, bills kept going up. We weren't paying attention, and it caught up to us.
Yeah, we had, another thing that is worth mentioning is we had the tornado event that happened in May, and so that was about $200,000 of unbudgeted expenses that came out of this fund. and so that was a drain to the fund that probably was not expected. So,
And by the way, on the budgeting part, I've looked at several audits, back to about 2020, and looked at budget versus actual. We got to get better.
yeah.
Our budgets versus actual don't even come close to lining up, year over year. And I don't know what, I know how budgeting works. You allocate this and you allocate that, but I saw several funds where we had money budgeted to every year, and nothing's been charged to that geo code for years. But then I've seen several, like I was one of them I was looking at that one of the geo codes for other services. The 2025 budget was $5,000, and the actual expenses were $208,000. And that could be trash cleanup from the tornado. I don't know.
Yeah.
But without looking at the GL codes, all I can really look at is red flags, things that stick out. And either way, no matter how you look at it, expenses have been going up at a faster rate than revenue has from growth. And I think it would be good prudence by the board to just kind of review everything with an open mind.
Well, and just so you understand, I think you understand this, but just so the listener does, if they're bored enough to listen to us, John, is that the mayor develops the budget, and he, I think he says he has meetings with department heads or whatever, and what we get is numbers on a page.
Yeah.
And so I think he's trying to guess, this is what we're going to do here, this is what we're going to do there, this is what we think the revenue is going to be, et cetera. And it's not just in the utility fund, the general fund as well. I mean, he's guessing, like sales tax is one we always guess on every year. And he's been pretty close with that, but he's really just stabbing at it. And I think to your point is maybe he's missed a little bit on that. Right?
Well, and I want to ask you, and let me ask you this because I don't know. I know state law says that we have to have the budget approved by September 30th because the new fiscal year starts October 1st. Are there any state laws or city ordinances that either state that, or suggest time periods where, for example, the department heads have to have their numbers to the mayor by this date, and then the mayor has to present his budget to the finance committee by this date? Because I know in the corporate world, if you've got a fiscal year in, let's say, of 12/31, we'll start working on the budgets in October.
Yeah. So we adopt every year. We adopt the MML, which is the Mississippi Municipal League, has a recommendation budget calendar, and we adopt that every year, and we follow it closely. They've already probably started prepping budget stuff now, and so we'll start having, like I worked at DeSoto County for years, and with the way we did our budget is about, and Vanessa Lyncher just retired. She's kind of who I learned a lot of my government stuff from as far as budgeting and things is we would really start in March, April, developing, hey, what your wants, what your needs, things like that, developing those things, looking at your revenue. We have to, like you said, we have to have our budget approved by September 15th by state law. There's some exceptions, but pretty much by September 15th.
Right.
And the big thing you wait on is on July 1st, this tax assessor gives you the numbers of what the next tax year is going to be. So that's really your money. So the revenue number. So
you can have a rough budget, you might say, prepared before July 1st, but you can't really fine tune it until you know those estimates.
But we know, like Hernando knows, we grow at a pretty decent increase. I mean, probably 1% to 2% every year. So we know that we're going to have a little bit more. You know, every time a house is built, you're going to see additional property tax. If a piece of land is platted residential and they start paying taxes on it, it's going to be added. If you have 100 acres that's agricultural, then it gets split to a subdivision, we're going to have more revenue in. So, but we have a pretty good idea. But that's again, and I think it gets confusing to people. That's the general fund. The utility fund is basically like a business account.
That's right.
And so we know we have 6,832 people is hooked up to the crew. That's how many we have.
That's what it is.
And we know what our bill is. So what I would think is you know what you paid last year. You divide that number by 6,832, and that's a pretty good idea what each person should be paying.
Right.
And how do you get close to that? Do you raise the rate? What do you do there to look at that? You know.
Yeah, and you know the reason I was asking about the budget is it seems like well, it seems like to me in all of this there's a financial reporting sort of transparency issue where and I hope this doesn't come across wrong or I say it wrong, but where we've been depending on I guess the city clerk and the mayor. You know that you guys get a docket every month of bills that need paid. And like the DECRUA, let's just say, I'm just going to use this as an example, the missed DECRUA payments. Mm-hmm. If we normally look at that docket and it's $1 million a month, and all of a sudden they hand you a docket of invoices to pay and it's $700,000, mm-hmm. you know, it seems like instead of rubber stamping or just signing off on it, we should be asking questions. Wait a minute, why is it just $700,000 this month? I'm happy that we only spent $700,000. But did something fall through the cracks? Because obviously, with the missed accrual payments, something did fall through the cracks. It seems from the outside looking in that there's an internal control issue. There's some
so let me explain. Let me explain how it works so you understand. So what we get as a board of supervisors, and again, I'm not trying to throw the mayor or any of those people that they all do a great job. I'm just explaining how the process works the way I understand.
Sure.
It, is we get a expense and revenue report. Like we'll probably get one Monday or Tuesday for January or for February.
Right.
Look at that. Every board meeting we get a docket of claims. That's the city's bills we have to pay. And what I have discovered is, because I go through it, and a lot of the other aldermen do as well. We approve the accrual payment like it's supposed to be. All right, there's $308,000, whatever's on that paper there, approved. That money is then put out of in the accounting software, moved from the utility fund to a clearing account. Mm-hmm. We assume that's paid.
So there's a missing step there. There needs to be
And for what I understand is once it's moved to the clearing account, they make sure there's enough money in there before they go mail a check or walk it up to the crew or whatever. And so I think they do that with our large expenses.
Well, then there you go. That may be a process, an internal process that we could make some changes to.
So that's something we're going to look at, yes. Yeah. But that's the way it was explained to me that's how maybe some of this happened is, the alderman didn't realize it was a cash flow issue, obviously. Yeah. It's not that anybody stole money, but we were waiting to get,
well, and tell me if this is right. This would solve the problem. Really, really simple. So if you guys get the docket of claims for this month, right? Mm-hmm. But then you also get another report from last month showing the docket of claims that was approved versus what was actually paid. That's a simple report. Should be. Yeah. It would be a month in arrears, but that way you guys can see. Yeah. Hey, we approved to pay this, but it didn't get paid, and you can ask why. Yeah. And figure out what the problem is. And so maybe that would help.
Another issue is just. Accounting is so complicated. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned some of the expenses. Well, sometimes what happens is we may have a project that we approved and funded in fiscal year X, but we don't actually we may actually receive the funds in X, but we don't expend it until Y. Sure. So it looks like we have a big surplus this year and a big deficit this year.
Yeah, if you put it together,
you balance it out. Yeah. Because our fiscal year goes from October 1 to September 30th. And so there's a lot of things like that. Like if you look at our budget over the last several, I think that's online, I believe. I know the audits are online. Please go look at them at the website. Completely transparent. We want, if you haven't, and I've had people reach out to me with some suggestions and ideas. I love that. I think that's what makes government great.
Sure.
So anyway, but if you look, we had a huge true up in 2023. Of $600,000. So if you look at the numbers
with the crew,
yeah. So if you look at the numbers, fiscal year 22-23, we actually did really well in the utility fund because that didn't hit to the next year, and so then we had a big deficit in that.
Even though the true up was related to the previous year,
so if you put them together, right. it makes sense, and so that's kind of where it's just you got to be it's different years, different things, and then somebody who's done this a long time, that you can move money around to make things, and I think that's what the mayor and them were doing, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they were just, doing the best they can, because I don't think they wanted to see rate increases.
No.
I think that's a last resort everybody wanted to see, and so I think they were trying their best. It just got to a point they couldn't move any more money around, right?
Yeah,
You can't play the little game, but only so long.
Well, we've all had that happen in our personal finances,
yeah,
and
sure.
you know, I've mentioned it to you. It's Murphy's law in life that the 1 month that you're having trouble paying your bills, that's the month the transmission goes out on your truck. You know, it just works that way. So, you know, but that's another reason why. You know, I don't know. You're not asking for my advice, and in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. But if it were me, if I'm looking at the Hernando budget, just from an overall 10,000-foot view, it seems like we've been spending at a faster rate than we've been bringing money in. And I think if we don't address that and do a good overall view and cut expenses or freeze spending where we can, you know, or you know, just common sense things, I think we're going to continue to have this problem. Hernando, if we can freeze spending or spend at the same level and let growth catch up a little bit, let revenue increase, then we would be able to have those surplus funds. We would be able to absorb those true ups without any problem and be able to replace air conditioning units without borrowing money and things of that nature. Hernando seems to be operating on a shoestring budget. There's not much else you can do with revenue. We've got to start looking at expenses. And I don't know what we'll find. I'm not saying that we have too many employees. I'm not saying anything. I just think that that's the next area that we really need to take a good hard look at.
Well, one thing we did, and if you watch the meeting, you saw it. Alderman Kitchens went through. I think he spent some time with the public works director. And found what he thought was some issues and we found he went through it. He found I think the one I circled there about $13,000 of additional cuts.
Yeah.
That we found. We did cut about $370,000 out of that budget. And you're right there. I think it's always good to go in and look at and make sure things are working and things are efficient. That there's one thing and you may have a comment on this, but one thing that I suggested is. We spend about $85,000 a year mailing out water bills.
Yeah, I was going to tell you that. So look, let me explain something to you. I might get into the weeds here. So in the corporate world, paying bills through checks are expensive. The checks are expensive. Stuff in the envelopes, the postage, the labor involved. And so in the corporate world, most companies that are on the cutting edge of technology have completely revamped their accounts payable departments and turned those accounts payables have always been a sunk cost. It was just a necessary evil of doing business. And so everyone has tried to automate that, paying things through virtual credit cards and you can actually you can turn accounts payable off of the city's revenue. It wouldn't surprise me if we change the way we pay our bills and start paying them in
electronic.
Yeah, that we could generate $50,000 to $100,000 in positive revenue and fees. That's something that we can look at. And I happen to know that there's several school districts and cities in the state already that do that through companies like Corpay. But so to your point, modernizing both the way we pay bills and the way we collect.
Yeah.
One thing could save a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize you can have your bill emailed to you now.
Right.
You log in and do it. One thing I would, and I think some of the aldermen would agree with this, suggest is that kind of like I'm a Cadence Bank customer. I think they just got bought out, but I'm with Cadence. If I want my statements mailed to me, it's like a $5 charge a month. Right. If you want your bill mailed to you, maybe you got a surcharge on there.
Yeah.
And I think most people, if they're going to pay $5 to have it mailed to them,
right,
or whatever that number, they don't have to be whatever the number is, they're going to have it emailed to you.
And if you're like me, I don't want the paper bill. I want it in my email box. It's the way. If it's in my email, I won't lose it. Yeah. It's there. But if you send me a paper statement, it might get mixed up with the, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
The Kroger ads and get thrown away and.
That's one thing I think we can.
How much do we spend, just out of curiosity, sending out water bills, paper water bills?
It's about $80,000, $85,000.
Wow.
So,
just think about it. You cut that in half.
Yeah. I think it's about. I can't remember that number off the top of my head, but it's every water bill customer.
Yeah.
Gets a bill unless you opt out, and very few people opt out of it. So
sure. And I don't know if there's any a room in the budget, but. if you look at this, a big chunk of the city's budget on the general side, police, fire, everything, is personnel.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm not saying that we have too many people, but I'm saying that we spend a big chunk of money on human labor, which is the most important, most expensive type of labor. But, maybe there's an area there that we can go back and look at, because to your point, if we modernize some things, the way we pay bills, the way we collect bills, maybe we don't need as many people anymore. And I'm not hoping anybody gets fired. I'm just saying, that's something to look at, because the personnel, when you for every employee, and then you kick the PERS kicks in and the FICA, and oh my gosh, it is expensive.
Yeah, well, that's and we can get into some state discussion, but the PERS, they keep kicking the PERS down onto the consumers or to the cities, and so they have to eat that. That's raised every year. Or every few years, the last couple of years, so that is a big expense.
Yeah.
But I think about almost 70% of our budget is on first responders and public safety, and so you got to be careful because you don't, if you start cutting firemen and policemen
But at the same time, you can look at other comparable
Sure.
towns and cities and say, okay, and I'm just throwing this example. Let's say Hernando has 50 cops, and then you look at other towns our size, and the average is only 25. If we have twice as many, then you might say, okay, well maybe we can do some efficiency and some cutting there, or just a hiring freeze.
Sure.
And I don't know if those numbers are off. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying it's worth looking at.
Yeah, and we have hired some police officers now. Some of those have been the school resource officers that we the school board supplements a little bit of their salary. So, but yeah, I mean, I think every year, I think you need to take a look at everything. Mm-hmm. And this, a lot of times, once you add an employee, you never take that employee back.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. And the only thing,
that's a recurring expense.
Yeah, so. You can't really fire people, but you can do like a hiring freeze.
Yeah, you can.
And say, okay, we're not going to hire anybody else until, because if looking at Hernando's budget, and I'm not saying we can do this because of inflation and other things, but let's just say if we had a flat budget for 3 years and continued to grow in terms of the population and the property tax, that would give us that cushion. And it might not even take 3 years. It might only take 1 year. So if next year's budget could be flat compared to, the 2027 and the 2026 be the same, there might be enough growth to give us that cushion to help balance things out and fix some things.
One thing, and I agree. I think we could always, try to be more efficient. But Hernando gets compared to South Haven and Olive Branch and Horn Lake and some of these Tupelo.
We're a residential community.
Yeah, we don't have those big property tax generators. We don't have the big sales tax generators. I've said this before on this podcast. I think I may even told you this before. God forbid if something ever was to happen to Kroger and Walmart for a couple of months, the city of Hernando would be in bad shape.
Yeah, and you're right. If we, and that's where we've always been a residential bedroom community, and as a lifelong resident of Hernando, I like that. But from a revenue perspective, to fix some of these budgetary problems, to build the ball fields that we would all like to have, we need some commercial industry. We need some big sales tax generators.
Get back to my point. So, like, if we hire a police officer in Hernando for X amount of dollars, because we can't afford to pay him what South Haven pays, what do they think that police officer is going to do?
Right.
He's going to go to South Haven, or go to the sheriff's department, or wherever. So we've had to fight that fight because DeSoto County, and this is something I think is about to come back up because South Haven is getting a bunch of money. If the XAI thing goes through, and I think they've talked about investing pretty heavy in public safety. So if their police officers are going to start out at $85,000-$90,000, how's Hernando compete with that?
Yeah, every officer going to win. Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
Right.
So that's some everything is not just so one sided. You have to look at the complete picture. And same thing, one time we had a hard time getting paramedics. We couldn't find any paramedics, so we had to increase the salary there to be competitive. And now, we added another ambulance and things like that. And so we've gotten a little more competitive with the paramedics, and we're able to retain some people and keep people in. But again.
But then if we got all that industry, those commercial businesses down here to generate that sales tax revenue and that property tax, that takes away from our small little town that we like. So it's a double-edged sword.
So we've always been in that where people, and I'm not saying you do, but people want the Snowden Grove or whatever, the restaurants and things, but they also want the small town, everybody knows everybody, the grocery store kind of thing. And so I think we're always in that conflict of fighting that. And that's what makes, at least my job as an alderman, and it's very difficult, is that we love, I grew up here, I want to keep that small town feel, but also we have to realize that people are moving here at a pretty high clip. Yeah. You know, that we're a city of 20,000 people. That's about top 15 in the state of Mississippi, and we're growing every day. And so
and whether we like it or not, we might be able to preserve that small town feel in a portion of town, the older, but eventually the industry is going to come, whether we like it or not.
Well, you know, and like, John, you know this, we have Madison Lakes that's approved sitting there. We have the subdivision there, Hernando West. I mean, in the right economic environment, we could have 6,000 people moved in here in a couple of years.
You know, Hernando West, that was started when I was in high school. Idea, that's. I mean, I'm 50 years old. It's been going over 30 years now. I still haven't seen a house built, but maybe it's kicking in gear.
No, I mean, I don't mean. I think Mr. Bill Brown owns that property, or he's a big part of it, and I think he's just waiting for the right time. So, and that's something else. And that's prudent to this conversation is we discovered when we started really looking at this. Is that, you know, they approved a special assessment on that property several years ago.
I remember that, yeah.
And that money was being paid out of the utility fund, and we were receiving it back on the property taxes that was going into the general fund. So that was about a $50,000-$60,000 hit to this fund.
Yeah, that's in the left hand, but paid out of the right hand.
It's coming back to the same place, but the general fund typically don't put so we were losing revenue in the utility fund. That we didn't discover until we started taking a second look at. So to your point, I think it's important to always be aware of what's going on and having a look. You know, we have the mayor, the chief financial officer, the city clerk, deputy city clerk. That's kind of what their job is to do, and so and they do a good job. I mean, I've talked about on this podcast too, John, is we have good problems here.
Yeah.
You know, you get outside of the DeSoto County bubble, and you go down to. And I don't want to talk about anybody's area, but some of these other counties in Mississippi.
My parents grew up in the Delta in Lambert and Marks, and you know my dad and I drove down there a couple of months ago, and you know just shaking our head. It just breaks my spirit to see the way the Mississippi Delta is now compared to the way it was in the 50s and 60s and when I was growing up as a kid. But you're right, we do have good problems.
Like one of the mayor, Chip's good buddies, was a former mayor of Prentice, and we would go to conferences and we would talk about different things. Oh man, we're building another gas station and you know people are upset about it. They don't want any more gas stations up here, right? And I agree with that. I agree with that. But he would say, Chad, I've been a mayor for 22 years or whatever it was. We've had one gas station built in our town at that time. Yeah. We would love to have a gas station.
Yeah, they would give anything to have people moving in.
So I think we get in that what I call the DeSoto County bubble or whatever. We forget about how fortunate we are and how lucky we are to have such a strong tax base. And if we want to, go buy an ambulance, we can. If we want to do things like that, we can because we have the tax base to do that. So we forget about that. So,
well, I think as far as back to our discussion on the utility fund, it appeared to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Because I'm not privy to the inside information, but watching the YouTube videos, it felt like you guys were caught off guard, like it caught us all, by surprise. And to your point of you approve a docket of claims of bills to be paid, but then you don't know if they get. It seems like there's some really basic, easy steps that we could take to. I don't know, some checks and balances, some transparency, some financial reporting that we could really easily do that would catch these things from happening in the future. It doesn't seem like a huge problem to solve.
Yeah, and so going back, so the finance committee you mentioned earlier, that's a new thing. We've a couple of the aldermen I think have thrown that around since we got elected, but we finally got that done this year. And so I think that.
And what is that? That's like 3 aldermen that are.
So we have various committees. There's an ordinance committee, a finance committee, and you kind of take a certain role. Personnel committee, I think, is another one they have. And so it's me, myself, Alderman Piper, Alderman Lynch, the mayor sits in there, the chief financial officer, city clerk, deputy clerk, and we meet, supposed to meet once a month. Sometimes if there's nothing going on, we don't, and kind of just review everything. But that's a new concept. We hadn't done that before. A lot of cities do that. A lot of bigger cities do that as well. And just get a second look, or a little more time to look at things going on. So,
well, and to your point, when I graduated high school in '93, I think the population of Hernando was about 2,500, between 2,500 and 3,000.
yeah.
I don't know what the budget was then, but obviously it was a lot less than it is now. Now we're approaching 20,000 people, top 15 largest city in the state, a much bigger budget. And so some of our issues on the reporting requirements and stuff may just be because we're still operating like a small town. And we need to, look at those internal controls and sort of revamp how we do things, because we're not a 2,500 person small town anymore. And so,
And I was actually talking about somebody.
so the finance committee being one of those,
When I started working at the DeSoto County Jail, we kind of had the same issue.
Yeah.
We were still kind of operating like it was a
Mayberry.
150 bed,
Right,
30 employee operation, and it was a 450 bed,
multi-million-dollar
150 employee operation.
Yeah.
So we had to change some of our processes.
Right.
And I think the city's the same way. I think I know this board that I've sat on, we've been very open to any changes. As, hey, we need to, like the chief financial officer, we hired him. That was at the recommendation of the mayor. He said, hey, look, it's time for us to get a professional person there. We did that.
I agree.
But look what we got ourselves into.
Well,
so, and I'm not blaming him, but I think there was, there's no one person to blame in this issue. I mean, I have just as much responsibility as anybody. I should have. Hey, Mayor, why are we missing our payments on our bills?
Sure,
right?
sure.
I mean, I'm not scared to take criticism. I think we all.
Well, we get in habits in life, and we just, we rubber stamp, pencil whip things. We assume, and that's what happens when we quit paying attention. And this is personal finances. I'm kind of preaching to the choir right here. We quit paying attention, and we get lackadaisical, and all of a sudden we wake up one day and we're like, oh crap. I forgot to pay the mortgage.
That's right.
And it wasn't intentional, and it just, and so, we have to take a step back sometimes and say, hey, how can we do better and keep this from happening again?
Yeah. And so as I mentioned earlier, I think the mayor admitted he probably could have communicated this better to us, and he's going to do better going forward. I think, he overestimated some revenue, he underestimated some expenses, and that's kind of what led to this. I think, and like you're mentioning, I think over time we've spent more than we're bringing in.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I'm happy to help if you guys want to do a deeper dig into this. But there's no doubt our expenses, even in the general fund, have outpaced our revenue or grown at a faster rate. And if you're just looking at your personal budget, if your income, if you get a 5% raise this year, but you spend 10% more, you might can get away with that for a few years. Yeah. But eventually it's going to catch up with you. And that's the trend since I looked at 2017 to 25. And the trend of the percentage growth of expenses has outpaced the growth of the revenue. And it's eventually, and this goes all the way back to prior administrations, eventually that's going to catch up with you. And so we're going to have to make some tough choices. Either that or we got to figure out how to make a bunch of more money real fast.
Well, I think leadership is doing hard things sometimes, making hard decisions.
Sure.
Right. And I think the hard decision was, hey, we need to raise our rates, or we need to cut this or cut that. We can't do that anymore. And it's no secret. I mean, this. I mean, you follow federal politics or whatever, national politics. Inflation has been has been sky high. I think if you look at the inflation rate from 2020 to now, it's probably about right where we are with the deficit we got. And so sometimes you just have to make those tough decisions. And I'm not saying that he's not, there's not a strong leader there, but you just got to do that sometimes. And I think it was, man, I don't want to raise rates or whatever. I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt people, or I don't want to cut this from the budget. I don't want to cut that from the budget. We need that, and just like you said, get lackadaisical and just keep moving forward. Then you wake up one day and
it catches up with you. And I want to tell you something else that I would like to see. If I was asked to help with this, I'd like to see, if I was an alderman, I would want a report of for the last several years of what we've paid each vendor. an expenses by vendor list that I could sort and then look. For example, I noticed that I'm just using this as an example, but the Motorola contract that does all the police radios, that just renewed, and I don't remember. I think it renewed
the body cams.
Yeah, and I think it renewed flat. I think it was the same as it was the year before. I don't think it was much of an increase. But my point is, I'm not privy to this information, but oftentimes when private industry knows that they're selling something to a government, if a hammer costs $12 at the hardware store, and then the federal government says they need to buy 100,000 hammers, they'll charge $45 per hammer instead of 12. So because it's a government, so it's good to keep those people, hold our vendors accountable and review those contracts and say, hey, workers' comp insurance, are we paying a fair rate? Yeah. And Motorola, and most of them probably are, but there could be some, you might find some things that, inflation's gone up, but hey, guy, it hadn't gone up 800%, and your bill's gone up 800%. Well, so what's the deal?
Fortunately, and we have state purchasing laws that helps with some of that. So, but there is one thing you have to be careful, and I've learned this in government is, anytime you see professional services, a lot of times those are no big deals.
Those are no big deals.
And I'm not saying that's affecting Hernando's budget, but
no, but it's something because everything matters. I mean, you might find, let's just say, a contract with a professional service and it's $50,000. Maybe it should have only been $40,000. Maybe it should have been 10% less. Well, there's $10,000, and then you look at another one and you find another 5 or 6 or 10.
Well, it used to be $50,000, but now it's $75,000. You have to go for bid for.
Yeah.
And so, and $25,000, you get another quote or whatever. There's all the, and I may be misspeaking on some of those purchasing laws, but they're there. So,
it's always good, to hold everybody accountable, not just within the city, but your vendors too. That's another thing I would recommend that the alderman review your vendor contracts between now and the next audit and see
one thing that I think you have it on here, the garbage that contract's going to come up for renewal, I think, next year, and that's something we're going to really take a pencil to and see if we can get that down.
Well, I live just outside the city limits now. Y'all will probably annex me before too long,
come get you.
But I still pay y'all for water. So, and it's funny because I've lived in Hernando city limits my whole life, but I'm about literally a half mile outside the city limits now. But when it comes to the garbage rate. The county, I'm on the county, so I pay Waste Connections directly, and I pay them the exact same thing that y'all just paid.
Yeah, and I understand that the county bills is a quarterly rate. Is that what you pay them directly?
And I pay them directly. Yep.
See, that's something we may look at doing.
Just get out of it, completely get out of it, remove that.
One thing that I think has happened in a lot of industries, not just garbage, but there's only about 2 or 3 different companies now that you can get a contract with.
Yeah, so if Waste Connection is ripping us off, they're ripping y'all off. They're ripping the county off. They're ripping everybody else. And I'm not saying they are. I mean, it's a reasonable rate. And in fact, if I would have known that y'all were only charging $22, but Waste Connection was charging you $28, and you were losing $6, y'all should have made that change a long time ago.
Yeah. Man, they'd come after our heads if we had done that.
And I hate to say that. My conservative friends might say, John, you just,
man, you'd have me on Facebook wearing me out.
It's supposed to be a pass-through,
That's right. Like I said earlier, and that's why I have no problem raising some of those rates. And the sewer rate, I think some people may, say we did a 100% increase or whatever. We're just passing through that expense. And we kept the water rates as what they are. And I see your sheet. I mean, water rates are pretty close to what other cities are. It's just some of the other things here.
The DeCrua stuff is a big deal. That's the biggest percentage of the the utility fund budget. And I don't know. There was some discussion in the meeting about groundwater intrusion and things of that nature. I've not researched DeCrua. I've not looked at their budget. I feel like they're operating on a pretty shoestring budget, but I don't know that. But it's a big number, so I don't know if there's anything that can be done with that.
They've had the same rate since they established.
Have they? Yeah.
And I think there is something to the ground, or they call it I&I infiltration and influx or whatever, inflow, but I think it just that just is an expensive process.
I'm not sure this would do any good or if we could do anything about it, but out of curiosity's sake, and I'll get back with you on this, I'm going to go look at other areas that do their own treatment.
Yeah.
That similar sized counties may have to go outside of Mississippi to do a true comparison. Several. and see what their costs are versus what ours is. And so, in other words, if similar sized cities or counties are doing their waste management for half of what the crew is doing, then maybe we need to be asking about the crew.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know that we'll find that. I'm just saying it would be interesting for a nerd like a numbers nerd like me just to know.
And I think with the crew, once you get South Haven and Horn Lake fully on the system, which is going to be 5 or 6 years from now, they're working on it. You probably you're aware of that issue. I think we'll see some rates come down because you're going to see we will no longer be the second biggest flow on the system. We're going to be probably the third or fourth.
Right.
And
you won't have an expense increase proportionate to you'll have more people sharing.
And I can't remember the lady's name. I think she's an engineer with Civil Link, and she works with the crew. And she said, when those guys come on the system, we may see a reduction in rate. And so that'd be great. Because right now, basically, Olive Branch and Hernando are the only people. South Haven has a small percentage of their population on the crew, but they don't even pass. They just absorb that charge. They don't even
when
charge.
Is the deadline for Horn Lake and South Haven to be off of the Memphis thing?
I believe they have to be off by 2031.
So we got about 5 years.
Yeah, but they've already done some engineering.
It's a big expense.
Yeah, it's a $300 million project, and they're trying to get some money from the state, some money from the federal to cover that. I think they're going to borrow some money. I think there's a plan in place to get it done from talking to people. So I think that they're in the early stages of doing some engineering to get that. But it's nasty to talk about poop. But it's really interesting how you pump it here and then you clean it and then it ends up in the Mississippi River and supposedly you can drink it when it comes out. I don't want to drink it.
Be thankful you don't live in Baton Rouge.
So, but,
I guess we live downhill from somebody.
Well, if you live on that side, it goes to Mississippi River. You live on this side, it goes to Coldwater River. So that's where they dump out the water to. But supposedly you can drink it.
Yeah, you can. I used to work for Joe Frank when I was in college, and we used to go out and test olive branches, and I never would drink it, but we would get it out at on the outbound side and test it with the litmus strips, and it tested just like the water out of the faucet, but I never tried to drink any.
So and we we'll finish up here, but we have done some things to cut that. We hired a stormwater person to look at Joe Frank's son Chris to look at some of these construction sites and making sure that the water's flowing correctly on the front end. We never did that before, and we've seen a deduction every year. And hopefully we get to a point where it's not that big of an issue. But I think we could also do a little better job of budgeting for that true up, so you don't have such that big number. And there's nothing, we get a monthly statement. We know what our flow is, so there's nothing stopping us from paying a little more that month too, because we know it's going to be more at the end of the year.
And it's the prudent, conservative thing to do is, I'd rather plan on spending more than actually spending less. It gives you extra money that you weren't expecting.
Well, John, we're right here almost an hour. I didn't expect to talk that long, but it's kind of a good conversation. So, do you have anything you want to close with?
No. Well, other than just thanking you for inviting me, I've enjoyed the conversation. Happy to come back anytime, whether it's talking about politics in Hernando or budget stuff or Ole Miss or Mississippi State baseball. Either one. I'm
an Ole Miss guy, so we don't talk about Mississippi State.
Well, I was proud when we won back-to-back championships, college World Series. So, and I'm an Ole Miss guy too. But
a friend of ours, I think you said you went to college with, Brian Couch. He keeps me updated on things, and he Hernando kid Topher Jones started the other night
and got a hit.
Yeah,
his first
for Hernando. So
I don't know
his little brother is in the same grade as my. Is the same grade as my son, so I see him sometimes at the games.
Well, 7A school. I mean, it's we've got we're pretty strong in almost every sport in DeSoto County now. And,
well, if you see our meetings, we always have the volleyball club, the cross country team, baseball, basketball, soccer. So,
it's amazing how many state championships we win in different sports. And
well, John, it was great to have you on. I like hearing your opinion and just having a conversation. I think you mentioned early on about like Charlie Kirk had to have a conversation, and we may disagree on some things that sound like we agreed on a lot today. So. But anyway, thanks for having on, and we'll wrap it up there. Do you have any final thoughts there while I get my music ready to play?
No, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, thank you, and tune in to the next episode.